are going to be focusing on how to trace using two different tools, the brush tool and the pen tool. To get started, you want to make sure you have downloaded this image right here from Google Classroom and that you've put it in your folder with your name on it. You're going to open your folder and you're going to use your mouse to grab this frog JPEG. You're going to drop it onto the Photoshop icon on your desktop. So let me just do that. And it's going to open it up. Now the first thing you want to do is check your image size. So I'm going to go to image and scroll down to image size. And I want to make sure that my resolution is 300. You don't have to change the width and height, but if your resolution is 72, change it to 300. We always work in 300 resolution so that our images are not blurry. Okay, so once you've made that adjustment, hit OK, and then you're going to come over and create a new layer. Now this new layer will become our trace layer, so we're going to write tracing. Okay. As we work, everything we do is done on a separate layer. So if I were to color in the frog's chest right here, I would call that a fill layer if it's flat and name it fill frog's chest so that I know exactly what I did on that layer. Now I'm going to come back to my background layer and I'm going to unlock it. I'm just going to turn the opacity down so that I can really see what I'm tracing. And then I'm going to make sure I come back to my trace layer. You always want to make sure you're doing your work on the correct layer. I'm going to go ahead actually and lock my layer 0 now. That is still my background, and come back to my trace layer. In the end, we will turn this original image off after we are done coloring everything in, because we don't need that original drawing after we've traced and colored. So we're going to start with tracing. Couple of things. Your toolbar is right here, and the first thing you want to do is make sure that you switch it back to black and white by clicking this little icon here, and make sure black is above the white in these boxes, because we're going to trace with black, as you can see. Okay, I'm going to show you over here your history. This tells you everything you've done, so you always want your history open, and if you don't see it, come up to this little drop-down menu here and say Reset Essentials, and then pop it out. So we've got our history so that we can undo our mistakes really easily. You can also use the eraser tool to undo, but the history allows you to just scroll back and go past that mistake and undo it. You can't redo it once you go back in your history, so be aware. Now we're over at our brush, and when we're tracing on our brushes, I'm just going to drop it down. You always want to be on hard round pressure size to begin with. This is our standard illustrative tracing brush. Okay, so go ahead and find it in your drop-down menu. It's usually under General Brushes. Okay, and you can see up here you want it opacity 100. For now, we'll keep the flow at 100, and you want your smoothing at about 37. Okay. The smoothing is going to give us more line control. It's going to smooth our lines as we draw, so we don't, if you have a shaky hand, it's going to help you control that. You want to make sure none of these other buttons are pressed. And then we're just going to see if this size brush is good. So I'm going to come up here. I'm at size 49. And it looks pretty good, actually. But I want to show you, you can change the size here. So that would be a little bit bigger, definitely too big. And you can come a little. So you can kind of work until you find that right brush. And you can see I test it, and then I just go back in my history. So I'm at 43. I think I'll stay there. Other things you can use, your hand tool, and we'll move your picture around. And if you want to zoom in to trace, I suggest doing that. And then come back to your brush. And you have to see, now my brush looks a little too big because of the adjusted size, so I have to adjust my brush. Okay, so now I'm just going to start tracing. And you can see it got a little wobbly, so I know I want to turn my smoothing up. And I'm going to find that place where you're really comfortable. Make sure your hand is rested comfortably on your Wacom tablet. These are not touch tablets. And one of the reasons they are not touch tablets is because you want to be able to put your hand over. You can adjust the position of the tablet. And you can even rotate the image to get a better line. Now, the harder you press, the thicker the line will get. They are a bit touch sensitive. The lighter you press, the thinner the line. So I'm not adjusting the size of my brush right now. I'm just pressing harder where it's thicker and pressing lighter where it's thinner. And I'm going to just up my smoothing because I'm still needing that smoother line there. And then sometimes, like this eyebrow, I definitely need to make it bigger to get that, because I can't get it that thick with pressure. And you can see I'm going around and tracing as accurately as possible. That is the goal. But is everything going to be exactly how it is in the picture? Probably not, right? And you have to make it look good. Does it look smooth? Does it look like there's a variance of width in the lines, thickness and thinness? Are you paying attention to that? You know, you've got to go off every once in a while, but does it look good? So we're really looking for line, what we call line quality, making sure the lines you're creating go from thick to thin, that they're smooth, and then line control, like how accurate are you? Are your lines wobbly or not? You can see here all the different types of lines I just created. So we're really paying attention to line. If the line was all the same everywhere, it would be really a boring drawing. So you can see I just adjusted the width. Here I'm going to go lighter by pressing light and then take hard. And then here I'm going to go much lighter because these are toes. So we're thinking about like, okay, toes are smaller, so they're going to have a thinner line maybe. Okay. And don't forget your little details as you're going. So we're really paying careful attention to line. I'm going to just quickly go through, finish up my trace, and then I'll show you how to put your white layer underneath so that we can begin coloring this another day. We are going to do 2 ways of tracing so that you have 2 ways to choose from when you do your bunny. Sometimes lines don't need to connect. Be aware that lines not touching often create more interesting lines. How do lines continue? Where did they break? Okay. So all these little decisions of what you're going to do. Here I'm just pressing really lightly. I'm not even changing the size of my brush again. I'm just pressing lighter to make those lighter lines. Okay. All right. Now, I think I've got this whole frog trace. I'm going to zoom out to double check. He looks traced. So now I'm going to come back to my background layer and I'm going to unlock it and turn it off. I'm going to press this little plus sign down here that creates the layer, and it's going to say layer 1, and I'm going to say white. And this is our background layer. I'm going to come over to the paint bucket, and I'm just going to fill in white. So you can see down here I changed it to white. I can also change it to white up here. This is your color wheel. We'll talk about that later. And I've selected my paint bucket. If you don't see your paint bucket, hover and press the bottom button on your pen and select it from the drop-down menu. Okay. And there we go. So this dude is ready to be turned in. So I'm going to go to File, Save, Save on your computer, never save to the cloud, and I'm going to name it my name, Frog PSD. This is my working file. Make sure it's in my folder. I'm going to hit Save and OK. Now, you can't turn in a PSD, so what you're going to do is you're going to go again to File, Save a Copy, Save on your computer, and instead of a Photoshop file, you're going to select JPEG. And you're going to save it to the same spot and turn the size down to size 7, and this is the file you'll turn in to Google Classroom. And so once you've done that, you can go ahead and exit out of Photoshop, and you'll see the JPEG is in your folder. And go ahead and turn that in.